Good afternoon, everybody. I'm here today to provide an update on the recovery of our fallen and Stalker 2-2 following the crash on April 29th when the Royal Canadian Air Force CH-148 Cyclone helicopter was conducting maritime surveillance operations. The helicopter was deployed with HMCS Fredericton under Operation Reassurance as part of the standing NATO Maritime Group 2. At 10 a.m. Atlantic time yesterday, the decision was made to conclude the recovery operation that was conducted by a combined Canadian Armed Forces and United States Navy team. After 8 days over the crash site, we located the helicopter, we recovered some remains of our fallen, and we retrieved multiple pieces of the aircraft that will assist in the ongoing flight safety investigation. While we were able to recover remains of some of our fallen, it is important to note that we have not yet identified these remains, and I cannot tell you whether we have found everyone. This will only be determined once the remains have been brought to Toronto, where any positive identification, as well as confirmation of the number of personnel found, will be done using scientific methods by a forensic pathologist. Once this is complete, the identities of the remains will be released to the families and then to the public. Maintenant, j'aimerais parler plus précisément de l'opération et de la séquence d'événements. Le lundi 25 mai, notre équipe de récupération a quitté la baie de Souda en grec à bord de l'EDT Hercules, un navire de soutien polyvalent qui a servi de plateforme pour la récupération en haute mer. The Hercules arrived at the search site approximately 220 miles east of Catania, Sicily on Tuesday, May 26th at roughly 7 p.m. Atlantic time. After about 2 hours of preparation, the team was able to get the remotely operated vehicle, or ROV, in the water and quickly began the search for Stalker 2-2 and our fallen. The recovery team used a United States Navy Remora ROV with a flyaway deep ocean salvage system that was integrated for operations with the salvage vessel. This ROV was selected as it has the ability to operate at a depth of 6,000 meters, twice the expected depth of where we'd anticipated the cyclone to be located on the ocean floor. For the most part, the weather conditions and the sea state allowed the team to operate the ROV effectively and locate the debris in very short order. It took the Remora approximately 3 hours to reach the ocean floor, and within 8 minutes, the sonar and cameras on the ROV revealed a large portion of the helicopter fuselage, which became the center point for the rest of the investigation. Given that we had very accurate data on where the helicopter entered the water, we did not have to rely on the underwater locator beacon and would have only rigged the detection system to the ROV if we had had difficulty locating the helicopter. Given that we discovered it so quickly, it did not end up being required, and I cannot tell you whether it was still pinging. At over 3,143 meters deep, with a debris field that spanned approximately 260 by 230 meters, aircraft components were found in a number of clustered groups to include many smaller pieces that were scattered individually across the ocean floor. Unfortunately, no portion of the main cabin was left intact following the crash, including the external cockpit structure. The largest piece at the wreckage site was the rear deck ramp area of the helicopter, and the next largest intact piece was the tail pylon and the tail rotor blades. At this point, we are not able to provide any additional information about the individual pieces that were recovered given the current and ongoing flight safety investigation. It should be noted that given the difficulty of the recovery and working at 3,000 meters, we made the conscious decision to only recover all discovered remains and only pieces of equipment that would be useful to the investigation. En ce qui a trait aux prochaines étapes, l'équipe de récupération à bord de Hercules se dirige actuellement vers la baie Augusta en Italie, près de la baie aéronavale de Sigonella. Il devrait y arriver tout demain matin. Une fois là, notre prochaine priorité sera de préparer le déploiement pour le retour au Canada qui devrait pouvoir se faire d'ici cette fin de semaine. There will also be some key equipment to the investigation that will come back on that flight. The remaining pieces of the aircraft, if any, will be securely stored at the Naval Air Station and will be transported back to Canada in coming days. At this time, I would like to echo comments made by the Chief of Defence Staff and extend my thanks and eternal gratitude to the United States Navy and the captain and crew of the Hercules. Throughout this whole process, they have provided outstanding support and astonishing results on behalf of the Royal Canadian Navy, the Royal Canadian Air Force, and the families of our fallen. I would like to thank them for all they have done to help us bring our shipmates home. In closing, and speaking more directly to the families of our fallen, it is our hope that this operation provides some closure to you. Please know that the Canadian military family grieves with you. Thank you. I'm now available to take your questions.
Commander, hi, it's Mike Tutton from the Canadian Press National News Service. My first question is for you is, Lieutenant Colonel Rouleau has stated a recovery of the aircraft will determine the cause of the crash in his previous news conference, May 27th. Why is this necessary, given you have the voice and data recorders?
What Lieutenant General Rouleau was referring to is that there are some other avionics pieces that we were attempting to recover that may contain additional data that could be used in the flight safety investigation.
As a follow-up, how much longer do you anticipate the Cyclone fleet will be grounded?
Thank you, Rear-Admiral Baines. Colonel James Hawthorne, 12 Wing Commander. So the operational pause will continue as the Director of Flight Safety continues to conduct the flight safety investigation. It is anticipated that initial results of the flight safety investigation will be forthcoming in the next couple of weeks.
To whomever can answer, did the Flight Control Command software cause an uncommanded pitch over in this incident, according to the flight data recorder or other recorders?
I have no insight into the flight data recorder or the cockpit voice recorder. The Director of Flight Safety investigation continues, and once that investigation is complete, all those details will be released. But at this time, I have no further comment or anything further to add to the flight safety investigation, as I do not know either.
Finally, could you tell, especially I suppose the families and others, having the flight and data recorders in previous accidents such as the Cormorant, they knew within a week whether human error or human factor was a cause here at play. Could you perhaps indicate if that was a factor at this point, now that you have this massive amount of data you can look at?
Director of Flight Safety obviously has the cockpit voice recorder and the flight data recorder, and using all that information to try and determine exactly what happened during the accident, so we don't have a repeatable accident in the future. But at this time, the investigation continues, and I do not have any information to provide at this time.
Thank you. I'm just wondering, could you describe again the evidence or the state of the helicopter and what you were able to retrieve there in terms of evidence?
Yeah, so the debris field was approximately 260 by 230 meters. And so as you can imagine, that's like, 2 football fields and a half by 2 football fields. And so that entire debris field was searched for both remains and critical pieces of equipment that we were looking to recover. And then once they had recovered all the avionics boxes that they were looking for, they then expanded the search outside of that debris field just to make sure that we didn't recover or didn't miss anything else. I'll be upfront with you to tell you that there was some larger pieces that we chose not to recover because operating at that depth with pieces of the helicopter that didn't have very good lifting points created a risk to not only the mission but to the ROV and everything else that was involved. So given that those larger pieces didn't hold any value for the flight safety investigation, we chose not to recover them, but we did recover all the remains that we found and any of the important pieces of avionics that were necessary for the investigation.
Just a follow-up with that, can you explain the process now with the fallen soldiers' remains, and just be more precise with the examiner's investigation? What will happen there?
Yeah, so after the ship comes alongside, there'll be preparatory work done to prepare the remains for transfer back to Canada. We're expecting those remains to arrive back in Toronto this weekend sometime. At that point, they'll be transferred to the coroner to do the autopsies, to do the identification of the remains. And once the remains have been identified, we will then notify the families and then the public.
Est-ce qu'on peut vous avoir en français aussi sur qu'est-ce qui a été trouvé au fond de l'océan?
La dernière portion?
Est-ce qu'on peut vous avoir en français sur qu'est-ce que vous avez trouvé au fond de l'océan, les débris?
Après avoir passé 8 jours, nous avons trouvé quelques dépôts et les équipements essentiels pour recouvrir le data. Et nous avons découvert autre section plus grande, mais nous n'avons pas retourné cette section à le navire parce qu'il n'était pas essentiel pour l'enquête.
Qu'est-ce que vous pouvez nous dire sur la suite des choses pour l'enquête maintenant? C'est quoi les prochaines étapes?
L'enquête va continuer avec le nouvelle pièce d'équipement. Et dans le futur, nous allons trouver le résultat de cette investigation.
Just to clarify, Commander, would the Canadian forces go back to the site if the investigation desires any of the further pieces of equipment, pieces of the aircraft?
No, we were very clear with the investigators that we had on scene, with the team that was on board the Hercules, that we got everything that we thought we could from the debris field, and there would be no intention to return to the crash site. Okay, thank you very much for being here today.
This concludes today's briefing. I would like to thank you all for joining us here today at CFBI Halifax. Merci. Ceci conclut le bilan. J'aimerais vous remercier pour votre présence ici à la BFC Halifax aujourd'hui. Merci à tous.